Ed Gein is the latest killer to be featured in Ryan Murphy's monster series that first took the world by storm when Dahmer featured back in 2022. And following the massive change in tone that we got with the Menendez brothers last year, I was intrigued to see which direction this one would go in and just how accurate it was going to be. Well, it was a mixed bag. There were quite a few inaccuracies that were featured, and from a tonal perspective, it was rather odd. There was a serial killer dance party as Ed Gein went into the afterlife. I mean, come on. Very, very strange. So within this video, I'm going to be discussing just how accurate it was. Here is Was the Ed Gein Netflix show accurate? The murder victims. One thing within the show that was correct was that the two main victims of Ed Gein, Mary Hogan and also Bernice Worden, were shown to us. However, alongside that, there was also a focus on Ed Gein killing a babysitter, Evelyn Hartley, which is something that isn't actually confirmed. And also two men that were roaming around near the farm after going hunting and stumbled into his shed. This was the one where Ed quite literally went all Leatherface and it felt a bit tonally inappropriate. It was rumoured that Ed could have been responsible for more killings, especially because of the sheer amount of body parts that were found inside of his home. But there were none others that were officially confirmed. It was only Mary Hogan and Bernice Worden, and Hogan was only confirmed because he admitted it rather than going on trial for it. When it came to the death of Bernice Worden, this was something that wasn't depicted correctly on screen, especially when it came to the build-up. There was an entire episode that was focused around Ed Gein being romantically engaged with her and him potentially moving in with her. But it was the voice of his mother that spoke to him about how she was a Jezebel and was spreading a disease around, which made him no longer want to be with her. Then, rather than walking away, he fired a hunting rifle at her when she wasn't looking and was ultimately found due to a box of underwear that had been given to him where his name was on the tag. Within real life, it was said that Ed Gein was lingering around the hardware store and was acting suspicious, which was spotted by other people. Then, when he went in there was a struggle and some kind of confrontation, potentially due to him stealing from there, and it was with the rifle that was on the rack that he killed her. His name was also written on a sales slip, showing him as the last person that was in the store. So it became easy for Ed to be positioned as the top suspect. Ed's murders weren't necessarily motivated by wanting to be intimate with them. However, some of the bodies from the grave robbing that he dug up were found in certain positions on his bed. But instead, his killings were motivated by the love that he had for his mother and wanting to kill somebody that resembled her in some way so that he could feel like she was still around. So the days that he spent with her where he was intimate was something that was purely fictitious. When it came to the murder of his first victim, Mary Hogan, this was one that unfolded differently to what we saw in the show. She wasn't shot inside of a bar. She was a landlady of a bar, but rather than being shot there, it said that she was apparently killed inside of her own home, and that was where she died before being taken to Ed's shed. So that was something that was depicted differently. The death of Ed's brother is something that was relatively accurate. It played out how the record showed in terms of him being found by the fire with bruising on him that looked suspicious. So that's why many assumed that Ed could have been responsible, especially with Ed being the unfavourable son at the time. The motive of his killings and the whole idea of him wanting to essentially become his mother and fill the absence that was there was something that got a focus in the show, and the influence that she had and the void that was left in his life was something that was explored. So they got that right. Even by including the household objects that he was making out of bones, skin, and other body parts. Ed Gein's relationship with his mother. Ed's relationship with his mother is one that I thought was depicted quite well. She did believe that women caused sin to the men of the world, and she didn't want Ed to be with any other woman other than her. So it definitely caused his mental state to be one that was in a confused way, and probably why he was so reliant and dependent on her. Augusta did have 2 strokes and die. However, when she had the second stroke, she didn't die immediately. She survived for a little while longer and then eventually died. In terms of the hold that Augusta had over Ed, it was one that was extremely influential, and she did dictate what he did in his life and the mindset that he had. One thing in the show that happened that I couldn't find any evidence on was when Ed was digging to try and get into his mother's grave and he wasn't able to. Her grave apparently wasn't covered in steel or stone or anything like that, so I don't know why that was included. Ed's arrest and time in the hospital. The arrest of Ed Gein is something that actually unfolded differently within reality. Ed was out at the grocery store and it was there where he was spotted and eventually arrested. From there, his farm was searched, not the other way round, and it was then when Bernice's body was found in the shed in the way that it was. The lie detector section was something that did actually happen, and it was a prime example of why it was a meaningless activity, because he had a mental illness. He passed the lie detector due to him being mentally disturbed and detached from what he actually did, as he didn't believe it himself that he killed the two people. As well as that, the whole Mindhunter part of the show where Ed met with Holden and Ressa, that did actually happen too, as he was interviewed as part of understanding the behaviors, traits, and mindsets of a serial killer. However, Ed's involvement in helping solve Ted Bundy's case is something that apparently didn't happen. Something that also didn't happen, because I can't seem to find any record of it, is the communications between serial killer Richard Speck and Ed Gein. He may well have inspired Richard Speck, but there's nothing to say that they sent letters to one another. I thought it was a bit strange that they didn't show the trial or even really highlight the sentencing that Ed Gein got. We just basically saw it cut to him being considered unfit to stand trial, and that was it. It never spoke of the multiple trials that happened without jury, where over a decade later he was finally found not guilty for reasons of insanity. It's a bit strange, but maybe it just wasn't dramatic enough for them to include. When it came to later on in life, it was kind of made out in this show that Ed Gein was this person that everybody loved and got on with, which I thought felt a bit wrong for the show to do. But when looking at how he behaved, it was said that he was quiet, would follow orders, and was seen to be quite harmless. However, it was still said that he remained psychologically disturbed and was obsessed with strange topics, even after being there for a long while. Adeline Watkins. Now, Adeline got a heavy focus in the show, and I feel that was the case for a couple of different reasons. The first is because she basically gave polar opposite statements to news outlets during the time, which meant that nobody truly knew what to believe. But if you look at the more recent statements following her retracting what she originally said about Gein proposing to her and them being in a romantic relationship, she instead said that they were simply acquaintances for several years and they were only romantic with each other for a small period of about 7 months. Unlike in the show where she was infatuated with the bodies and what Gein was doing, she stated that she never visited his home, which at the time would have had bodies in it. Ilse Koch. Ilse Koch featured for a large part of this show for being the inspiration that Ed Gein had. This isn't necessarily true. It was said that Ed Gein became fascinated with photos from what was emerging from the concentration camps after the Second World War, but that was merely just one part of where his mind was at. I don't think it was as heavily influenced by the likes of one individual and wanting to be viewed as this really cool figure that he perceived her to be. So overall, in terms of how accurate the show was, I think it's pretty accurate, but it just took some creative liberties when it came to certain things within it. In terms of tonality, there were elements of this show that I thought worked quite well, especially earlier on in the show, which I will do another video on. But at the same time, the ending, in trying to make us feel sorry for him, it just felt a bit strange. And the almost animated nature that some of it had with the green goo, the lights and the dancing, it just didn't quite work for me. So, there you have it. Was the Ed Gein Netflix show accurate? If you want to see more videos on the monster series, such as Dahmer and the Menendez brothers, then check the videos below. What did you think of the Ed Gein series? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.